Ho ho buddies, welcome to Borderline Games. I am Gareth and today we're playing Chaos Head. Now, we're on the rooftop, we're talking to Senna and we're talking to Rimi and we're talking to Kozapi. We're thinking to Kozapi because she's on the rooftop and we're communicating via our thoughts because that's what we do with Kozapi. And there's this big conspiracy. It seems like Rimi knows a bunch of stuff. Senna is trying to kill me because of the formula that was written in my Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes essay. But we don't know any more than that, I don't think. We just know that we're responsible for a lot of bad stuff, including the death of Senna's family. So does that mean that she's from the future? I don't know. Let's find out. So I think Rimi's just said, don't say any more. He really doesn't know anything. From the sounds of it, she was talking about me, but I couldn't follow the conversation at all. Is this the formula? Kozapi leapt down from the container house, holding my essay in her hand. She held out the back of the essay to us. I saw what I doodled on it back in my elementary school. IR2. The chaos infesting Shibuya right now had started from this. Talk about an absurd accusation. There was no way in hell some random doodle could affect anything, let alone of that magnitude. I just doodled the thing on a complete whim when I was bored or something, probably. It was a long time ago, so I didn't remember it at all well. But I did know that there was no real meaning behind it. I just copied down the numbers I'd seen in a dream. It was a dream related to Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes, which I'd written about on the front. I'd use those words all the time since, even before I'd written it, and whenever I had, it would all take shape in my dreams more and more. Within one of those dreams were those numbers. Fun, the power of 10, times by int. The power of 40 is equal to IR2. After a while, Senna wiped the tears from her eyes. Now they were a deep scarlet. Bloodshot. While still on the ground, while still hanging her head down in regret, she formed a sentence. The moment you created that formula, the world diverged. Alright. Nozomi. Okay. What stands before all else within Noah the Second is a particular formula incorporated into the core system. Its solution has remained unknown throughout the human history, even to this very day. One of the 7 million prize problems, yes? I know of these. The 7 still unsolved problems within the realm of mathematics, each with a $1 million prize. I'm afraid you're incorrect. It is not among those 7. You see, in truth, there was a time when the Millennium Prize problems contained 8 problems. One was expunged before the rest were made public, which is how it was remained even as we stand here today. The equation incorporated into Noah the Second, I take it. And the reasoning behind its expungement? The possibility within to shower the world in calamity. Most notably. Just what manner of formula is this? It is a a resonance phenomenon, which speculates on electromagnetic forces within the fundamental interactions. That is what the formula conveys. In turn, it has elucidated an unknown force, one which manifests through local interaction between established electromagnetic pulses and receptors. Through this one formula, the accumulated research and development on silent weapons, all the efforts of every nation over the past 30 years will become obsolete in a mere instant. Whoever finds a solution to that question, why, they would be akin to God himself. Is that what you have accomplished, then? It was found in a most mysterious place. The scribblings of a child, if you can believe such a thing. IR2. With this formula, the hardware of Noah II has obtained the ability to rival God himself. All that remains is to gather code samples of Gigalomaniacs for usage with the software. With the full-scale operation of Noah II, all that we desire will be made real. Oh, how I wish Einstein were alive today. I hear he was a Gigalomaniac of tremendous power. Rather than speculation, how fares the current situation? Is it not said that the world's number of Gigalomaniacs is few? How can we hope it to succeed under such circumstances? The samples of 5 people have already been secured. An adequate number for the operation of Noah II, it seems. Splendid indeed. However, with each and every additional sample, the abilities of Noah II will rise. And in particular, there's a Gigalomaniac boy whose sample I have much interest in harvesting no matter what the cost may be. Be that as it may, any delays that face our project will not be tolerated. What milestone do you believe shall mark Noah II entering full-scale operation? The final experiment prior to operation. The third melt carried out by myself. Do you plan to induce another earthquake? What of its estimated scale? I've no idea who's talking at this point. It's anticipated to be on the same level of the Great Kanto earthquake. The Great Kanto earthquake? Did that not have a magnitude of 7.9? With modern-day building code and seismic isolation levels in mind, the city will sustain nowhere near as much damage as it once would. But the number of casualties will certainly dwarf that of the first 2, will it not? If in line with our estimates, it'll probably approximately it'll total approximately 5,000 people. A measly 5,000. Although I must say that estimate is optimistic. Are there any questions? I expect you'll be taking responsibility for this folly. Shall I carve out my stomach and perish before your very eyes? Oh? This is the final experiment. Look, when the time comes and the third melt has produced the results we seek, Noah II will see perfect completion. The world's possibilities will then be in our hands. Okay? Is that alright with you guys? The moment you created that formula, the world diverged. Diverged? What, like with roots? This wasn't an eroge. Taku. Let's just go. There's no point listening to this. Rimi pulled on my hand, pleading me to go inside my room. Her demeanour oozed feelings of desperation. Rimi was afraid of something. Everything Aoi-san is saying is a complete and utter lie. You're the liar here. Aoi-san, just get out of here already. Never come near Taku again. Who should I believe? Why are you getting so mad over just a random formula? Do you really not know anything? Think about Einstein, authored E equals mc squared. Through simply creating that formula, a future where nuclear weapons are developed was born. The IR2 you created is the same as E equals mc squared. No, it has an even bigger impact on the world. IR2 made silent weapons a reality. Silent weapons? Mind reading, visual projection, and control over the 5 senses. Wasn't that the patented technology Senna had told me about before? The one that she was investigating. Soon, Gigalomaniacs won't be something special. No, they won't even be considered abnormal. Thanks to the device made based on IR2, in the future, anyone will freely be able to use this abhorrent power. Of course, before that can happen, It'll likely be monopolised by a number of shitbags who'll then brainwash the masses into livestock, mindless sheep completely unaware of their oppressors. How would I have known all of this? Go on and on about this shit till the end of time. It still wouldn't change that I didn't know anything. Even if Senna was speaking the truth, I never would have intentionally tried to make something so horrifying, not in a million years. It was just a doodle made by a kid. I hadn't done anything wrong. Wowie zowie! If really so, I am too is... Oh, you're too. It's something that explains the powers of Gigalomaniacs all sparkly-warkly just like that. Things that Oldie Moldy guy said were all true after allsies. I mean, he said the most important thing was the boy who created Whose Eyes Are Those Eyes? And that boy was Takumi-chan all along. Kozupi spoke in a carefree tone. I would never be able to act as innocent as she could. Just like me, Rimi also showed no signs of answering. Senna, meanwhile, opened her eyes wide and raised her head with a start. She rose to her feet, staggering. Why was her footing so unsteady? Did it have something to do with what Rimi had done to her earlier? Kozui, what did you just say? Oopie? Senna drew closer to the puzzled girl, pressing her for answers. Who exactly is this oldie moldy guy? Well, it's the person that told Kozupi about her precious D-swords are. No, about how they are. Precious, I mean. The first person Kozupi talked to when Kozupi came to Tokyo. When Kozupi thinks back on it, he wore an icky outfit that made Kozupi want to pinch her nose, and he was holding a sign with something really weird written on it. The world is ending, or something like that. But why didn't you tell me about this sooner? Yeah, but Kozupi's telling about it the second Kozupi remembered. It's him. Oh, I've finally found him. Me, Rimi and Kozupi, the three of us, unable to understand what Senna meant, could only watch with confusion as Senna's blood-curdling demeanour boiled and bubbled. Finally, I can kill that bastard. Alright, okay. Somewhere else now. There had once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment she had known nothing of. So this is Senna's mother. She was a perfectly ordinary housewife and had been blessed with a second child in her womb before turning 40. No, perhaps perfectly ordinary might not have fit her quite so well. After all, her eldest daughter was already old enough to enter high school, a 15-year gap from the second child. She had been slightly worried that her eldest daughter, adolescent that she was, would oppose the pregnancy. However, the exact opposite proved to be true. Her daughter's heart sang when she heard the news. Her husband, an established scientist, often lost himself in his research and faith, and rarely ever came to home to his family. But when he was home, he always did his best to be a good husband and father. So while she housed some dissatisfactions, they would never surpass the love she held for her husband. Her second child was delivered without issue, a healthy girl of 2,579 grams. She named the child Mana. Soon after, her husband was unfortunately made to transfer far away. Her husband held no capacity to support himself with even the most basic of life skills, forcing her to ask her stable daughter to go with him and tend to her father's needs. Since she was now living alone with the newborn Mana, they then opted to move to an affordable company housing as per her husband's plan. She had initially been living in an apartment within the suburbs, but this made transport inconvenient. The new company house, however, was in the best area in Shibuya, and many of her husband's colleagues' families lived close by. Her considerate husband claimed that because of this, there would be nothing to worry about in her times of need, including when she needed help with the baby. Every room in the company house was spacious, and she particularly favoured the bedroom. One wall was home to a large mirror, and the opposite wall had an even larger window. From there she could view the luscious greenery of Yoyogi Park. She then went on to quickly befriend a housewife living close by and received extraordinary treatment from the company, namely being provided a housekeeper. Awesome. She was proud of her husband for holding such an important position within his company, one that allowed her to live such a luxurious way, and so her life without worries nor dissatisfaction continued. 2 years passed while Mana had experienced delayed growth. She'd grown into a healthy child, all while not contracting any major illnesses. She was a very pampered child. If she did not cradle Mana in her arms, the girl would start crying in a voice so shrill it could shatter even the thickest glass. Regrettably, she had fallen ill about a month prior. A particular grave symptom was a fierce tinnitus, something she suffered from throughout most hours of the day. Fortunately for her, the housekeeper and the housewife next door were more than willing to assist her with taking care of Mana. Regardless of the help she received, she was essentially joined at the hip with Mana, and she was never able to part from her even for a moment. Even when going to the bathroom, even when taking a bath. If a thought were to even cross her mind about having the housekeeper cradle the baby for a short time, Mana would detect those intentions and immediately burst into tears. Contrary to what one might surmise, she actually found endearment in how much Mana clung to her, but due to the inseparability of the two, she continued to live a life where she could even take a single step out of her own home. Her lifestyle was entirely supported by the housekeeper and the housewife. For her, meeting the two had become her true saving grace. However, over time, something odd began to happen with the two helpers. During a friendly chat in the living room that had occurred a week prior, the housewife had spontaneously vomited without warning. Oh no. Paying no heed to the confusion she showed, the housewife then rushed outside. She had not seen her since, leaving her to worry that she'd perhaps fallen ill. Concerned, she decided to ask the housekeeper if she could check on her. As the housekeeper left that day, she made her request, concluding with an "I'd love your help tomorrow as well, dear." And yet, when the housekeeper heard those words, she suddenly burst into tears and could only nod again and again as she departed. The tinnitus that had been tormenting her so became fiercer that night, to the point where it felt like her head itself might split apart. She tried calling an ambulance, but the line refused to connect. She then tried going outside to ask the neighbouring housewife for help, but even that proved too much for her. Throughout all of this, her daughter had continued to cry incessantly, further agitating her pain. In order to endure this terrible pain, she embraced her beloved Mana. But as she did so, both the tinnitus and the crying abruptly stopped. The pain in her head vanished just as suddenly, almost as if it had never been there to begin with. She then looked down only to see that the child she was holding was now a mummified corpse. What the fuck? In spite of how heavily it had been crying until that very moment, the body had suddenly become a desiccated, rotting mound of flesh, one that gave off the most repulsive stench. So this was part of the experiment. This is fucked up, isn't it? And so before she could even realise it was all an experiment, her mind broke. There'd once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment that ran different to how he had hypothesized. Oh man. He was a scientist at Nozomi Technology, a follower of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light, the man at the center of Nozomi's strictly confidential Project Noah, and the man that had deciphered fun is to the power of 10 times by int to the power of 40 is equal to IR2. He had offered his wife on the verge of childbirth as a test subject for the experiment. While that had been an instruction from the founder that he revered, it had been just as much his own suggestion, all to ensure the success of the experiment. It was christened the Mana experiment, after the codename given to their second daughter. His eldest daughter of 15 was placed in a Cosmic Church of the Divine Light institution, all while he observed his confined wife and infant child for 24 hours a day. His wife had now been led to believe that the place she resided in was a company house, but in reality it was a test site that Nozomi Technology had prepared. A site containing the Noah the second prototype he was developing. Mind reading, visual projection, and control over the 5 senses. In order to research the effects of such practices, he locked his wife and daughter, Mana, in the site as test subjects. Not much was known about the effects of electromagnetic radiation on the human body, so he very much intended to halt the experiment immediately if his wife or child showed any strange abnormalities. The experiment was then met with an unfortunate accident soon after it began. Mana passed away at 1 month of age, her cause of death unknown. It was an accident nobody could have prevented. He was overcome with sorrow and attempted to bring the experiment to a close, and yet such a thing was not permitted to him. Do you not find it rather intriguing? Those were the words of his employer. His employer was referring to the bizarre sight visible within the experiment. His wife did not seem to recognize Mana's death as real, and instead treated her remains as if they were still her child. In her eyes, Mana had never died, but in truth, these things were all simple projection, a reality only she was privy to. This was an effect of the Noah the second prototype, and in a certain sense, the situation provided an optimal opportunity to test its capabilities. Consequently, he had his wishes disregarded. Eventually, even he came to think that continuing the experiment would be best for his wife's sake. Looking upon the one-way mirror, his wife would embrace the corpse of their child and lived her every day in blissful happiness. She would gaze through the window toward the greenery of Yoyogi Park, but in reality the window was a mere wallpaper and the scenery a projection, and yet she simply smiled at the view, all while gently tending to her child as she cooed. Staff belonged to the research team would take care of his wife, with one playing the role of a neighbouring housewife and the other a housekeeper. As long as the experiment continued, her mind would never break. As such, he told himself that this was all for his wife's sake. Though in truth, perhaps his mind had broken far beyond before his wife's ever could. At some point in time, his goal had changed from completing Noah the Second to forcing his wife to continue living an endless dream. Okay, it's pretty dark. After continuing the experiment for 2 years, his employer suddenly announced an end to the project. We've obtained sufficient data. Noah the Second will begin full operation, meaning there's little point to continuing this experiment further. He, how do you say this word? I always see it written down. Vehemently opposed this, his desperation evident, and yet this passion had him branded a traitor, and he was subsequently removed from the project. As a gesture of kindness, he was permitted to be present at the test site on the final day of the experiment, albeit within restraints. And with him his daughter, of whom he had not seen across those 2 whole years, was forced to be present. A look of bewilderment rose to her face when she noticed him. Dad? What's going on? What did you do to Mum? What is Mum hugging? He was unable to answer. His guilt over what he'd done prevented him from looking at his daughter in the eye. Meanwhile, the start of a ghastly ritual was drawing near. The housewife had long since become unable to endure Mana's rotting stench, and the housekeeper had left the test site in tears in response to his wife's words. Then the equipment was stopped. The dream ended, and his wife broke. In her eyes, what was once her child had suddenly transformed into a mummy, a sight that brought her to scratch at her scalp, tear out her hair, dig her fingernails into the flesh of her face, and then... I don't like this. Begin to ravenously devour the desiccated body of her own child. Okay. Through every tear of flesh, she continued to laugh maniacally, bang her head against the wall, before eventually she took a kitchen knife, drove the blade into her own eyes, and died right where she stood. What the fuck? Mum! Mum! The daughter cried and screamed as she watched her mother's horrific end from beyond the one-way mirror. Mum! 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 No! His daughter was then taken away by two researchers, with one taking hold of each arm. He was not even granted the opportunity to pursue his only remaining relative. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love this music. He blamed himself for everything, believing he'd reaped what he himself had sowed. Regardless of his reasons, when he'd resolved to continue the experiment 2 years ago, it had been obvious how things would end. Mere days after bearing witness to his wife's death, he vanished, and now nary a soul knew of his current whereabouts. After everything had settled, Senna had gone on to interrogate Kazupi about something with bloodshot eyes, and then after doing that for a bit, she ran off somewhere on her own. Kazupi had chased after her, but I, meanwhile, had just been staying put, still incredibly confused as to why Senna had become so obsessive all of a sudden. And now I was trudging to Shimikitasawa. My parents' house was only a short distance away. Walking from my base to it took less than half an hour. Could Nanami be there? Though not as busy as Shibuya itself, the roads of Shimikitasawa were fairly crowded. I was still being hit by the aftermath of that Esper debacle. Namely, some passerbys looked at me with mocking sneers, while others even took pictures of me on their phones. Overwhelmed by embarrassment and humiliation, I hurried along the road to home. I'm sorry. Rumi's eyes were pointed to the ground as she said that. She was walking a bit behind me, and in the time we'd spent moving along, she'd already repeated those words over 10 times. I'm sorry for not saying anything. No matter how much she apologized, I had no way of answering. I didn't know anything about Rumi. Nothing had changed ever since we first met. And yet, she supported me. She stayed by my side. But at the end of the day, there was still so much I didn't know about her. Even so, I'd already brushed that issue out of my mind. Perhaps it was because something in me knew that she wouldn't stay with me if I knew the truth. And that terrified me. But why do you stay by my side at all? I worked up the courage and asked her what was on my mind. I asked her the reason why she would stay with a guy like me. Was it because she was trying to lure me into a trap the entire time, just like you had? And yet, despite my suspicions, the answer she gave was nothing of the sort. I didn't want you to awaken. I want you to live a normal life. Didn't want me to awaken, like as a giggly maniac. Rumi knew more about me than I did. Who the hell are you exactly? Rumi hesitated a little. I'm someone who really does think of you as a friend, Taku. And I want it to stay that way. In other words, she was telling me to stop pushing. But there was no way I could stop there. Am I a giglomaniac? You are. But you also aren't. Which was it? Was she trying to dodge the question? Did you know about IR2? I'd only heard about it. She didn't say from who. Is what Senna said true? No, it's all lies. Lies. Telling me it was all lies was a lie in and of itself. I could tell just from looking at her. You. I was about to ask more, but I held my tongue. Are you my enemy or are you my friend? Depending on the answer, I might not have been able to stay with Remy, so I didn't ask. If I pretended that nothing had happened, I could keep on deceiving myself just as I had been up until now. That way might be easier for me, happier even. Okay, that was what I was going to do. I was going to keep being ignorant and keep living a lie. A lie told by Remy. Remy had saved my ass so many times already, so there was no way any harm would come to me if I did that. I deserved to live a normal life, just like she'd said. Thank you. I averted my eyes from her and swapped out my question for a few words of gratitude. For protecting me. Taku. I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just continued walking toward my parents' house in silence. But she was like, don't go to your parents' house, wasn't she? My eyes were eventually met with a familiar alleyway. It was a quiet, secluded residential area. Every now and then I could hear the faint sound of a train in the distance. I'd known this specific chunk of scenery ever since I was a little kid. This was where I'd grown up. I'd walked to both elementary school and middle school using this alleyway. If I headed through the narrow alleyway in front of me, my house would be right there. I was scared of seeing Nanami again, but I had to know for certain whether her arm was still there. I stopped and took a deep breath to calm myself, and then right when I was about to start walking again... Wait. I turned around to see Remy on the verge of tears. Do you have to go? No matter what? Please, don't go. If you do, you'll never have a normal life. I don't want that for you. What was that supposed to... How about we just go back? Back to your container house. I'll stay with you as long as you want, Taku. We can go to school together, have silly conversations with Daichin together, go to a soba stand or a CD shop on the way home together. It doesn't matter what. Let's just forget this and keep doing what we've been doing. I have to see Nanami. She won't be there. I'm sure of it. Why was she so sure? Or was it just another lie? Would something bad happen to me if I went home? I don't want you to be sad, Taku. So you say. Can you just stop being cryptic for once? I'd had enough. This is bold of Taku, isn't it? She was telling me to stay ignorant forever. I couldn't go on like this, pretending like I knew nothing. Of course I couldn't. Each and every person I knew just kept hitting me with non-stop cryptic nonsense. It never ended. I really did want to stay ignorant. I really did. If there's a reason I can't go home, then just say it. I'm so goddamn sick of all this half-assed cryptic bullshit. Sick of it. Did I have any right to say that? Wasn't I the one who always half-assed everything? Who never said what I really meant? Wasn't I the one who always ran away from everything? Yeah, I was. All the more reason to just keep doing that from now until forever. It was time to go home. Rimi was right. I didn't need to see Nanami at all. If I was planning on checking whether she had her right hand or not, then what the hell would I do if she didn't? Wouldn't that be all my fault? Nanami would hate me. Resent me. All it would have done was solidify that I was a pathetic loser that couldn't even save his own little sister. If I left everything up in the air like it is now, like it was now, I wouldn't have to be loaded with guilt. So that was what I'd do. It was the optimal choice. Don't look at anything. No matter how many mysteries come your way, ignore them. Shut yourself away from the world. You're a real troublemaker, you know. I swear, you couldn't do a thing if I wasn't around, big bro. I can't do it. Nanami's cheerful voice popped into my head. I just can't do it. If I ran away now, I wouldn't be able to face Nanami for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be able to go back home for the rest of my life. Taku. I clenched my fist and stepped forward into the narrow alleyway that led to my parents' house. I was less than 50 meters away now. At first I just speed walked. Then I started running. Running toward the home I'd been raised in. 30 meters to go. 20 meters. 10 meters. Is it going to be there? 0 meters. And when I looked, the house I knew. Is there? Oh, wasn't there? Was gone. What? The name on the door plate was wrong. It wasn't Nishijo. In fact, the entire shape of the house was wrong. It was far newer and nicer than the home I'd lived in. I looked around. I wondered if I'd mistaken one of the neighbouring houses for mine. But I hadn't. Actually, none of the surrounding scenery lined up with my memories. I considered that maybe I'd gotten lost or taken the wrong alley, but there was no way that could have happened. I'd recognised the entire route until now. I knew for a fact I remembered the route, but my home wasn't at the end of it. After taking the path from my memories, the scenery that should have been there hadn't appeared, and a completely unfamiliar one had instead. So instead of deja vu, it's déjà vu, isn't it? What should have been a familiar place felt like I was setting foot in it for the first time. It's déjà vu. No, it's not. Rimi stood right behind me. She denied my words immediately. In this world. You don't have a home to go back to, Taku. What? Whoa. Okay. We are now gonna find out more about that. Is this gonna be a flashback, maybe? I guess we'll find out next time on Borderline Games. Okay, holy fuck. More mysteries and more mysteries. Rarely answer a mystery, introduce another one instead. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Chaos Head, and I will see you next time, where we'll be jumping into the bigger mysteries of Chaos Head. I can hear a wheelchair already, so we know Shogun is around the corner. But we'll do that next time. Thank you so much for watching this. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Chaos Head, and I'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye. Have a good evening. Bye bye. Thank you.